Papal Heresy: The Consequences. Has it occurred to you that your Catholic media sources may be guiding you into heresy or schism? Has it occurred to you that many of their reports on Catholic issues are geared to cancelling out the Church altogether? Everyone still in possession of a sense of reality knows that most media are not only capable of lying to us, but do so quite systematically. The whole fact of misinformation, and worse, disinformation, seems to be before us always. Yet we rely on what the media tell us. Most of us are largely at their mercy. How else are we supposed to find out what's going on in the world and in the Church? Perhaps this doesn't matter so much when it comes to information on secular politics or some social issues, although even there our understanding of what's being conveyed may be literally a matter of life or death for us. But we are most at the mercy of the media when, as Catholics, we are seeking information or enlightenment about church affairs on so-called Catholic sites. Here we find a whole raft of information, and a whole raft of takes on that information. Some of this information is true, and some demonstrably false. As for the takes, these may be driven by everything ranging from the true Catholic perspective, this is rather rare, to the most toxic forms of prejudice and propaganda. It doesn't take much experience to recognize that these commentaries are often driven by right-wing or left-wing perspectives rather than genuine Catholic ones. This, for a start, should make us feel uneasy. The Church is not a political playing field. Its teachings, doctrinal, moral, and social, are clearly laid out for all to see, should anyone be interested. They don't lend themselves to political point-scoring and faction warfare. Catholics, we hope and trust, are interested in truth. Truth about what and who we are, what and who we believe, and what and who the Catholic Church actually is. If we were to fall under the influence of some of the commentators and influencers who offer their own truths on all or any of these, we would be in dire straits spiritually. And, depending on our awareness and culpability, outside the Church, with all the horrors that this implies. There are two predominant and particularly toxic trends anyone can note who searches the internet for religious information, inspiration, or affirmation. One is the growing popularity of spiritual sensationalism, fascination with religious occultism, preoccupation with the diabolical, with apocalyptic end-time predictions, false mysticism, etc. Much of what is peddled on these sites has no official church approval and no validation in Catholic spiritual tradition. It can only feed into people's desire for an emotional buzz. It will certainly not deliver the genuine spiritual food provided by the Church. Some groups who specialize in this kind of spiritual inspiration have been officially banned by the Church. This includes the Mission of Divine Mercy Apostolate in Texas, which carries on quite confidently anyway, the members' non-compliance with the Church and the Pope, whom they rather openly deride and slander, should be a warning signal to any Catholic with a smattering of integrity and loyalty to run in fear from their prophecies, preaching, and interpretations. The other trend in the media is the one based on the extreme traditionalist views and demands, of those who begin by agitating for the free availability of the old form of the Mass, and end up by refusing to acknowledge the pontificate of the present Pope. The whole thing is becoming a major religious movement, which at its most radical involves condemnation of the Second Vatican Council, a refusal to accept the validity of the new order of Mass, and a claim to return holus bolus to the pre-Vatican II Church. Obviously, there are gradations of intensity in this movement, but the more the official Church lays down liturgical and theological norms, and refuses to cave in to political pressure by those who want Catholicism on their own terms, the more frustrated and recalcitrant many traditionalists become. The point at which it becomes impossible to support this movement is when the focus of their antipathy and angst is on the Pope himself, and more importantly on his teachings. The point has now been reached when it's a danger to one's soul to give any real credence to the content on their websites. Why? To start with, we can use our reason to arrive at the fact that their accusations against a pope of heresy, or at least distortion of the Catholic truth, can't actually be true. These people seem to be very sure that they have caught the Pope uttering false teaching, but they don't go on to note that Christ has thereby let the Church down very badly, and that the Church is over. Some are happy to go further and travel down the sedevacantist path that says the Pope is not the Pope. The spiritual and juridical implications are much the same. Each of these positions, that the Pope is a heretic and or isn't the Pope, is fundamentally inconsistent with Christ's promises. And those of us who have been resonating with either one should take stock of our own level of belief about the nature of the Church, and should demand from our media gurus a much more stringent and rational analysis of Church affairs. What we should all do in the face of negative interpretations of papal utterances or writings is our homework. People who haven't woken up to the shortcomings of internet coverage and commentaries should do so rather quickly for their own spiritual and intellectual health. They should start from the sane premise that reports of papal heresy can't actually be true, and set about finding the text of the Pope's actual words and an interpretation that confirms what he actually meant. What we most often find in media reports are misquotation, misinterpretation, expressions taken out of context, and all the other tricks of the propagandist trade. It's very hard to find an intelligent counter-report that bypasses all this dishonesty and reports with at least some objectivity. But it must be done. How? Where? There's no refuting the fact that finding the original and complete texts of papal interviews is not easy, nor is finding a clear translation, nor an official reading of it. When it comes to papal documents, these can always be found on the Vatican website and should always be consulted if one is interested in what the Vatican or the Pope is really saying. When you check out the wording of these documents, you realize just how far most media reports have departed from their true meaning. It's enough to lay low all your hopes of finding honesty and integrity in many Catholic media sites, and to induce you to rely on them no more. For some Catholics, what the Pope does is enough to make them cry heretic or Protestant. They don't like the people he gives audiences to, or the groups he seems to sympathize with. But we should know that these things are not the matter of heresy. They don't rank very highly among the shocking personal moral behavior and lifestyles of some popes throughout the Church's history. And if Pope Francis has taught false doctrine, he is the first pope in history to have done so. The tired old instances we hear cited of popes teaching falsehood have long been debunked as invalid and untrue. When you think of it, the actual implications of a pope abusing his magisterium are terrifying. They involve the creation of a great big tear in the seamless garment of the Church's doctrine, the breaking of Christ's promise of divine protection against error, and the resultant end of the Catholic Church. It's not much comfort to anyone to observe that the Church is still visibly around. St. Peter's Basilica still standing, the sacraments still ostensibly being celebrated, the church is still being frequented, the bureaucracy still grinding on. If these people who attribute error to the Pope are right, this is all empty show. Their claims are simple wishful thinking. So those who go ahead with their accusations against the Pope's teaching as false or heretical should think again. If they really believe their position to be true, those three fearful things must also be true. We have no Pope. The Catholic Church is over. And Christ hasn't kept his promises.